My name is Micky Malka. I'm originally from Venezuela, and I'm the founder of Ribbit Capital, based in Silicon Valley, and entrepreneur who built companies in Latin America, in Europe, and in the US. And I'm very happy to make this panel work today, and an honor with the people that are here. I'll start, and when we can take it from here. So let me start with a very quick question. What do you get when you put 2 Colombians, 2 Venezuelans, 1 Brazilian, and 1 Argentine in the room? I think you get a better soccer team, a better football team. Let's start with quick introductions around the table. All of you run some of the most successful and better known brands and companies in Latin America. All of you are from different places in Latin America, but all of you share one very important topic. You all attended an MBA, and you all attended the MBA at Stanford, at the GSB. So we have people that go, Marcos is our older statement here. He's class of 99, and I'm not gonna keep going because it will make everybody else. But I'll go, if you can quickly introduce yourselves, even though you know each other, but for the rest of the people that are attending the webinar, just quickly, what year you attended business school, and what do you do today? And then we can start with some questions about Stanford, about the business program, and about Latin America. Marcos, you're the older statement, so we're going to start with you.
Hi, everyone. How are you? I am Marcos Galperin. I attended GSB 97 through 99, and I started Mercado Libre out of the GSB. Actually drove my first investor to the airport from a class at the GSB.
Lori?
Hi, everyone. I'm Lorian Garcia. Most people call me Lori. I went to the GSB from 2008 to 2010. And I'm a co-founder. I'm one of Kavak's co-founder. Currently, I lead everything related to culture and organization. And we started Kavak about 6 years after I graduated from the GSB.
Welcome, Lori. And Gabriel, David?
Hello, everybody. I'm Gabriel Braga from Brazil. I went to the GSB from 2010 until 12, together with David and a few other entrepreneurs in the region. I started QuintoAndar right after school. Actually, we started discussing the idea during school and came back to Brazil to start it.
And hello, everyone. David Velez, also from 2010 to 2012, originally from Colombia, started Nubank, also right after business school, end of 2012, beginning of 2013.
Jeronimo?
Hi, everybody. Jeronimo Uribe from Medellin. I went to GSB 2012, 2014. I started getting into real estate before GSB, and it was something I was very passionate about. And during GSB, went deeper into it. And right after GSB, I started doing traditional real estate and started covering with the idea of doing something different around 2017. And that's what led to what I'm currently doing at Haus.
Well, welcome to all of you. It's a privilege to have you here and to dedicate this next 45 minutes to talk about an MBA, why it matters. So let me just throw out this first very simple question. Of all the things you could have done when you look back in time, why did you choose to do an MBA? And we can do a free flow. I can ask each one, or you can just go and start and just intervene. Why did you choose to do this? Who wants to start?
I can start.
There we go, Lori.
I remember, a few years ago, I was looking into grad schools, and when I did my research, I realized that an MBA was the most complete program that I could find. Like most master's degree would probably you focus on something professional and learning a skill. During the MBA, especially at the GSB, you go through a personal transformation and a professional transformation, because it's not just about going to class. It was about the people you meet, the classmates, and all the new things that I would be exposed to. And I wanted to go to Stanford because I love that what they're always saying about changing the world, and I wanted to be part of that.
Yeah, for myself, I went to undergrad in Brazil. I always started in Brazil. Had the chance to study some good schools here, but didn't have the kind of world-class exposure that you can have in a school like Stanford. And besides the academic and the professional impact that could bring to my life, I think it would be a different person after spending 2 years with people from all over the world, different culture, different religions, different backgrounds, all kind of different things that can influence my personality, my understanding about how things work globally. And eventually even my kids can be friends with the kids of my friends from MBA that are from all over the world and do a bunch of interesting things. And I think specifically about Stanford was a very small community that I think I would have a deeper connection with those people and be exposed to the Silicon Valley, which was a big dream for myself. Sometimes is an excuse for you to spend 2 years or more in the middle, in the heart of tech innovation in the world.
To me, it was a bit of a moment to take a step back. I had already been in business. I was doing investing for a few years before business school. I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I didn't really see a clear path of just simply leaving the job and then figuring out how to start something. So it was a bit of a breather to take a step back and understand, okay, what's the next 10, 20 years of my life going to look like? And can I take opportunity of those years to do some switches, to meet more people, to work in some skill sets? In a way, it was almost everything beyond the business. The business aspect was actually the least interesting part to me. It was more about the non-business classes, as well as the community and the people that I was expecting to meet, and frankly, just the time and the network. That's going to give me a little bit of a breather to try to understand that. So from that perspective, I think worked out really, really well.
Who was a bigger partier or socializer, in Gabriel or you in that class?
I think it was pretty competitive, I must say.
The V was amazing at it.
Yeah.
The V is yeah.
You competed hard. So I don't know. I think we tied.
Marcos?
Yeah, I think similar to what has been said. I also wanted to take a breather. I might add, I was particularly attracted at Stanford because of the golf course, which ended up being very important for my career, as well as John Donahoe, the CEO of eBay, was an avid golfer. So that was an added skill for me. But joking aside, no, I wanted to spend some time in the Valley. I really wanted to be in the West Coast. I had done my undergraduate in the East Coast, and I was convinced that the entrepreneurship skills that I was going to learn at Stanford were going to be very useful for me, and it definitely turned out that way.
Jero, anything to add?
Yeah, I think for me, it was, I had clear what I didn't want to, what I didn't want to do. I didn't want to do something very specific, very, very technical. I just had the gut feeling that there were many things to learn about the world and to try different things. And I think, like Lorian said, the MBA afforded that spectrum of different things you could expose yourself to.
There's a few questions coming through the Q&A that I may throw and just change a little bit the ones I had in mind. But and one question that comes here on the thread that it's interesting because it's something that I did not go to MBA, I did not go to Stanford, and yet I'm here helping promote a program for Latin Americans to come to. We're going to talk more about it later towards the end of the chat. But one question that came around was, do you think it was worth the investment? Like, you're making a big investment in yourself, and you're deciding to use that money or your personal money and time to make a 2-year investment in yourself. How do you think about that versus starting a company without it? It's one of the questions that came through the chat. Since all of you have started companies, I think it's one of the best panels in Latin America to ask this question.
Okay, let me give that one a try first. I think it's a great question, but because a lot has changed since I did my MBA, but also I think since my colleagues here as well, because of the availability of online education that has boomed in the last few years. I think that if you are really thinking about the educational experience, mostly because of the skills you want to learn, the finance skills, digital marketing skills, or whatever, I think you can get those today online quite well. I think that what Stanford provides is a much more comprehensive experience. I think, in my case, I literally drove to the airport, the person that invested in my company, my classmate, Stelio Tolda, he's been working with me for 23 years. He's the president of the commerce part of our business. The president of the payment side of our business is a guy that was doing the MBA 1 year ahead of me. So basically, I built the company with my classmates, and that is something that you will never get doing an educational experience online. So I think it depends very much on what you're looking to get from your MBA. Stanford is really, really unique in many aspects.
Yeah, I would add it. I would very much agree with Marcos on that. I think one thing that somebody once mentioned to me is that if you take the long view on your career and you think you're going to be working what, I don't know, we're going to be working 50, 60, 70 years, who knows? Investing 2 of those 60, 70 years into a fundamentally different experience where you're going to be exposed to different ideas, different people, and open to have that network take you in different unexpected directions is a very interesting opportunity. Similar to Marcos, I ended up working in GSB with Sequoia for a year, and suddenly they became my seed investor in Nubank. If I hadn't gone to Stanford, I don't think I probably would have ever met them. I don't know if I would have ever even been able to raise the capital that I needed for what I wanted to do. And so similarly, as I said initially, I think you wouldn't do business school necessarily for the business. If you want to do business, you want to do accounting, read a book. You want to do marketing, read a marketing, take a course. But it's all about everything else that's not the business is the entire really ecosystem and what you get exposed to that makes it a very powerful 2-year investment, either from a time or even from a money perspective.
I identify with a quote I heard Joel Peterson say at the last launch I had at the GSB. Somebody asked him that similar question. He said, look, the bottom 10% of people don't deserve to be here. The top 10% of people don't need to be here. For the other 80%, it's a transformative experience. And I consider myself to be part of that 80%, not because I did at the time. I polished my financial skills, I polished my marketing skills, but it was a much more comprehensive experience, learning more about the world and learning more about yourself and building relationships that really unleashed a lot of personal value. And
if to add, I think of course you can do something, have a great business without going through an MBA. But I think that if you go through an MBA, especially through Stanford, it kind of like gives you like a superpower, like a super booster accelerator. Like I see right now my day-to-day work, most of the things my toolkit that I use came from Stanford. Everything I learned in communications, knowing how to write this, how to say that, how do you actually get people to engage with your message. Everything I learned in leadership skills and how you actually build relationships within your team to be able to achieve something that goes beyond what you could do by yourself. All of that I remember, sitting in Stanford, reading the books, practicing role playing, and all the things are the things that I use right now daily, most of the time. And
Lori, for you, Carlos, your co-founder of Kavak, and your brother, he went to Oxford for his MBA, and you went to Stanford. Is there any competition at home around this topic?
Nope. You think there would be, but there isn't. We compete about a lot of other things, but not about that. Mm-hmm.
And when you're let me switch a little bit the question. You all run now big companies. You're all recruiting a lot of people. When you are in that process now as a founder, as the leaders of your companies, and you're recruiting, what are you seeing in Latin America? What are you seeing from people that are coming from with education? What are you needing the most? What would you like to see more of? And in the same way Marcos was mentioning that part of his team that runs Mercado Libre are all Stanford ex-alumni that did it. And I think Gabriel can also talk a little bit about that, which I think I just jumped him, I forgot him. But how do you think about that potential of people coming out with these programs in your company's futures? Maybe we start with you, Gabe, since I forgot to ask you, and you can answer the other.
Don't worry. I only agreed with everybody, so it would be kind of repetitive. So in our case, our almost entire executive team, were part of Stanford. Many of those were in the same class. I think that today what we see is this, the people that have the chance to go through these programs, they have a much accelerated learning curve about everything, but much more a faster way to access the answers of what they need to learn. If sometimes they know already because they were exposed by that, but if they don't know, as Laura was saying, they can quickly, tap their network or expand their horizons there and learn quickly about those things. And I would add to that, in Latin, we are particularly, restricted from people that actually had experience doing what we are trying to do. In our case, it was very hard in the beginning here of the first cohorts of startups in Brazil. And today I see a big difference of companies that are starting and can actually recruit people that spent a few years working on the companies and can come, and they hit the ground running because they already were exposed to that. So if you have the chance to go to a program like this, spend the time working in Silicon Valley or other companies, it's something it's super valuable for you coming back and you wanting to join a company in Brazil or in Latin that usually can't have access to talent that actually was exposed to doing things like companies in the US have, right? Like you hire an engineer there, they spent a few years on 1, 2, 3 companies that you're aspiring to be. Here that's much harder and easier to find with people that are in these networks.
And Marco, since you've been out of the GSB the longest, if you had to do the MBA again, what would you do differently this time?
Well, that's a good question. I think when I did my MBA, I focused most of my efforts in attending lectures by guest speakers and building relationships with my classmates, and both on and outside of the golf course. And I think that's what I would do again. I think that was the most valuable things for me were those, just getting inspired by the amazing lecture speakers that we would have. Again, one of those ended up investing in my company, and the incredible classmates I had, who basically helped me build my business, but are also many that are not working in Mercado Libre, lifelong friends that are to different things and are just an amazing community to be with. So I think that's one of the most valuable things that GSB provides. I didn't get into more technical classes at the time. I think I would these days. I would do some programming. I would learn some more code. Something I didn't do then. I would definitely, rather than learning the basic accounting skills or maybe basic statistics skills, I would definitely learn basic coding skills.
David?
Not much to add. I mean, to be honest, I was happy to have spent to be able to have spent a lot of time with friends and meeting really good people, expanding the horizon with the job opportunities, having been able to work through my second year, get me up to speed. I had the opportunity to start spending time in looking at investing in Latin America, and to me that was what I wanted to do. I want to make sure I wanted to go back to Latin America. One of the advices that I received from a mentor was, I think this is helpful perhaps for everybody in the panels, which is on the community here, which is strategically you want to position yourself where there is a scarcity and not where there is oversupply. Now, I always thought that a Latin American that went to the US and stayed in the US had no real differentiation, was going where everybody was. But a Latin American that could go to the US and then go back to Latin America, that's where there was real scarcity and continues to be a scarcity. And so I think that's ultimately very, very related to the impact that you can create in some of the countries that we come from. And so to me, having been able to have a foot at Stanford, but spending a lot of time with the community and investing in Latin America and looking at what was going on in Brazil, in Colombia, and Argentina, and other countries was a really great opportunity. So I'm glad I did that.
You guys have, in combined, you've led companies that in aggregate are worth more than $100 billion in Latin America. You all came to Stanford, you all studied, you all decided to go back to Latam and start companies there. When you think about going back to Latin America and taking from where David just left it, what was the hardest part of going back after Stanford?
You can start there.
Go ahead.
So I agree very much with what David just said. I had the opportunity to work at Airbnb during the MBA, and decide to come back to start a company out of nowhere, and that had no reference outside of Brazil. So it was, I think the cool part was to go and come back and be an actor of change and try to change something that really annoyed me, the experience that we had in Brazil and the opportunity to fix a problem here, and that it was opportunity for me and also responsibility, because I felt like empowered to take everything that I had learned there, the network that I had, and come back and kind of bring to Brazil and to Latam something that could impact many lives here, probably much more different than I would have done if I stayed in the US. The hard part was that everything is harder in Latam, and everything is slower in Latam. So there, you talk to a bunch of people and they want to invest. Here, nobody wanted to invest in us, and we spent many years, just bootstrapping with, by the way, a few friends from Stanford that were the first angels, but it took a while for us to really have a Series A institutional money coming in, which is a very different reality today. And also hard to find talent. That just as I talked to, we were doing that for the first time. We had no real idea of what we were doing, and I would, have paid a lot more if I could find talent that would show me a little bit of the way. And we had to learn almost everything from scratch. I think this is also changing, but it still is a big difference from doing business in Brazil or Latam comparing to the US.
Anybody has a different, I want to ask that question to each one of you. It's an important one. What's the hardest part of going back to Latam and working versus staying in the US for you?
I was going to say, I think that the personality of Latin Americans is amazing. It's warm, it's fun, it's outgoing. So building personal relationships in Latin America is great, but the way we organize ourselves as societies is still far from being perfect. And that's a challenge for everybody's daily life when you compare it to the US or when you compare it to Europe. I mean, that imposes challenges on on how you raise your family differently, on how you live daily security issues in the region or social issues in the region. So to some extent, it's a trade-off on the quality of life, on the tranquility of life you can lead. That's also very challenging. That's also what makes doing something for the region like inspiring and makes you want to do more. But it's a challenge. It's a personal challenge.
Yeah, I would add, for me, there is no playbook. When you look at, at the US, what was going on in Silicon Valley for entrepreneurship, there was some guidelines that would tell you want to gain, you want to, raise money, it's gonna here, you want to include talent in your team, you kind of do these things. Here, at least 5 years ago, there was nothing. You had to kind of make up everything along the way. And I would also add that when you want to solve one problem in America and you start solving it, you need to solve like 100 surrounding it. Like if you want to say, I want to start a company to sell phones, and then you realize, okay, but there's no connection to the wire. And then I need to add the connection to the wire. Okay, but now there's no, no post. And you have to have everything around to make your business work. That if you probably would have, if I would have said in the US, I would have said, okay, I'm only going to focus on this. And then everything around kind of works. And it's going to kind of help me to the environment. Here, you have to assume nothing around works. And you're going to have to solve it too. So you're going to have to build a lot of expertise around your main core business.
I would say, sorry, were you saying something, Mickey?
No, go ahead, Marcos.
Oh, sorry. So I was saying, first of all, I think Latin America is changing a lot and very fast. I think it's important for everyone to have that in mind, because many of the things that were very hard, for example, like getting funding or finding, good technical talent, all those things have improved a lot and very, very fast. Obviously, there's still a war on talent, etc. But the same thing happens, everywhere in the world today. So many things have changed for the better. Having said that, I would say the unpredictability of Latin America is just incredible. It's incredible. And the longer you operate in the region and in the more countries that you operate, the more impressed you are by how unpredictable things are. And that obviously it's fun. That is very fun on the one hand, but it's very hard. It makes it very, very hard because it's unpredictable in many different ways. And, it can be very hard to build businesses for the long term. Sometimes it's politics, sometimes it's unions, sometimes it's judges, regulatory frameworks. You end up encountering things that, you would never dream of encountering in the US. Maybe once every 20 years. In Latin America, you encounter 5 of those per year, So that in my opinion, is probably one of the hardest things to build and grow a business for the long term in the region. And I don't see, unfortunately, I don't see that changing for the better. I see it changing for the worse. For example, one of our most predictable, perhaps our only predictable market was Chile. And all of a sudden, Chile now has become nobody knows where Chile is going. So it's interesting. That's something that you will definitely not find in the US or in Europe.
I like this topic of Latin America. I want to stay here, but I just have to make a very small, there was a question by Francisco. Somebody named Francisco was actually quite funny. He said, all of you guys sound like you have a very different accent of English and different level of knowledge of English. How difficult was to do your Toefl and your Gmats? And if you remember your score. Does anybody remember the score?
What's a Gmat?
But as expected, it was hard. It was really hard. But I think harder than the Gmat was the first 3 months at school, trying to really be able to talk and understand. And you read, half the speed, and when you write like a quarter of the speed. It takes a lot of pushing and willpower and headaches to be able to try to stay at the level in which you can actually contribute to the class. I don't know, the rest of you agree.
And it's not only in the classes, because the classes are more formal, more organized. So if you're used to read and write, and maybe not so used to talking, but you can get going. The social life is also very draining. You go to a bar and it's loud and everybody's talking over each other and make jokes that you don't understand. So it's kind of, you think that you go out and you relax, but you come back like exhausted, and then you have to keep talking about it. But get used to it. So it's part of life, and after the pain, it's one of the benefits as well.
There's a lot of questions going back to LATAM that we have. It's hard to get all of you to be on one chat, so let's take advantage of that. Record amounts of money being raised. There has never been a better time to be an entrepreneur in Latin America and to start something. Is this hype? Is this real? Is this like anything that it will go through different cycles? Where is your mindset to this? Because there's a lot of questions on the chat coming in from a lot of people actually trying to understand how important it is to fundraise, or if fundraise is a measure of success, how to think about starting a company today in Latin America with all these founder abilities to have money versus stay in some other place. So just a little bit, love to get your thoughts on those topics.
Micky, you should answer that one. You're investing heavily in the region.
Fair. So I too was an entrepreneur in the region, as most of you know, and I am shocked with the amount of capital that is available to start. I wish that had been the case 20 years ago, or even 10 years ago, or even I had a chance to meet David when he was raising his seed round and I passed. It was a Colombian going to Brazil, but we corrected the mistake later in life and we invested later. But I will say what is different is just the quality of the mission of the people. I find that for the first time ever, I'm seeing people who truly want to change the region and have the tools and the technologies there these days to do it. So I find that to be different than any time before in terms of what can be done. But I do think that the record amount of money is not a recipe for success. If anything, I'm more concerned that it will create the wrong incentives and greed will overtake the mission. That's what I worry the most right now.
I would just add to that, and you obviously you probably have the best perspective from all of us given your investing actively, but whenever you actually see the big numbers, even if the money has increased a lot into Latin America, it's still very much below what you would see in other geographies, even when you compare it to Asia or to India or to US. So availability of capital is really everywhere. And yes, it's great that it has improved out in Latin America, but it's still relatively small compared to the size of the opportunity that exists in the region. And I think it's at a point right now where people are still very much grabbing the capital and being responsible with it. You generally do see businesses that have good business model, real unit economics, real business fundamentals since the very beginning. You still haven't really seen a lot of the craziness that you sometimes I think you see in the US and in Europe. I think I would say still it's becoming more appropriate, but it hasn't gone to the point where it's absurd or people are wasting money all over the place. At least that's my 2 cents on that perspective.
Yeah, I would add that it was hard for me in the beginning to envision that we would build companies the scale that we're seeing some of the companies here and the speed that we're seeing these companies grow. And it's very good to see some examples that that's possible. And you see as robust companies, with strong talent platforms, strong cultures, they really know how to develop products that will, solve big problems. I think what Ravi is saying is just a follow-up to that. But the challenge for myself that sometimes we struggle here is like, as Marcos was saying, is very unpredictable in Latin. And so on the one hand, it's very good to put money in the bank, and then you comparing to a few years ago where you didn't have the money in the bank and you had to keep going. So it's much better to have the money in the bank, but you don't know if this wave is gonna continue or just be a short wave of capital that comes and goes, and then this push and break. It's kind of hard in the companies, and if we could have more predictability and more stability of this capital, and you could plan around it, it would be much healthier for the companies, I think, to not be to agree that I need to raise now and then raise a bunch of capital, maybe more than you need, maybe at a valuation higher than you should, and you spend that in a way that maybe a year or two from now you won't sustain the same rhythm, and then you have to pull back in the company. So that's kind of one of the hardest things in Latin. I've seen the last 2 years, for example, every quarter or every semester we had to adjust our plan due to external factors in a way that was like, man, I know that's a dynamic business and we are adjusting all the time, but in Latin it's kind of a bit more exciting, and I think funding coming and going is one of the biggest reasons for that.
I think I mean, sometimes I think the hype, whether it's hype or reality, I think sometimes you don't know until things unravel. But not thinking about the future, but about the past. I compare the headlines of today, and they may seem somewhat exuberant, but to the headlines of approximately 12, 15 years ago. And the kind of companies that were raising money were companies that were doing oil exploration in the Colombian Amazonian basin or in the Pre-Salt in Brazil. And that was the exuberance then. And I'd rather much have the kind of money that is flowing today into the region flow into the kind of businesses that it's flowing into, and let there be a bubble there. Bubbles always tend to correct. Than in the kind of sectors that we were seeing it flowing into not more than not about a decade ago. So I'd rather much have this kind of market dynamics, this kind of destination for money, than the ones that the region saw in previous cycles.
And I would add that, beyond the money, I'm very, very excited of what I'm seeing, because I'm seeing a lot of talent. There are a lot of people now that see entrepreneurship that really want to, take on a problem and solve it. And they're seeing with a capital flow that it's something that can be done. So I think it's just going to be a lot more stories of entrepreneurship from Latin America, people doing amazing things, because I'm seeing the people that want to become entrepreneurs, that want to join an entrepreneur, an entrepreneurial team, which is amazing. And we didn't have that 5 years ago.
Lori, there's a question that came up a couple of times around, you're the only woman in this panel. How do you see the Latin American startup environment evolving for more gender equality?
Usually I'm the only woman in the panel, unless it's an only women panel, which they're not a lot. Well, there's still a lot to do. There are a lot of social things going on in Latin America that have been going on for a while in terms of what's the women's role and how we could do so. We're not there yet. We still need to figure out a way to get more women interested in becoming entrepreneurs, get more women interested not only in becoming entrepreneurs, but in solving bigger problems. Because as women, we usually tend to go to smaller markets. We need to go to bigger markets, and also to trust ourselves more that we're going to do it. So it's going to take a little bit, but I know we're a few women here and in as entrepreneurs, and we're really trying to see how we can have a multiplying effect.
David, you had a you have a Cristina as a co-founder in Nubank. As you think about, and you see a lot of people that are starting companies in Brazil, have you seen any other changes there?
Yeah, I think I've seen changes. I don't think it's as fast as we all wish. I think Chris, my co-founder, is still one of the few Brazilian co-founders of one of the large tech companies. And that's very surprising in a country where over 50% of the population are women. But I see more and more. It's happening more and more. There is not only more women going and starting their own businesses, but also venture capital focused on supporting women-led businesses. And I think that just the entire ecosystem is arranging itself to make it much more inclusive and available. So I think it's still early. It's definitely not where it should be, but the trend is good.
One question that comes a lot here is, how are you recruiting people for your companies? What language is the official language companies are speaking when you hire technologists and developers in different regions? As Latin America becomes, as all of you are growing to multiple countries, how is that an issue and opportunity in the future? So let me put it this way, Marcos, what's the official language in Mercado Libre in the technology team?
Meaning coding language or?
No, the speaking language when you have people from different countries.
It's Spanish. Typically, it's Spanish. Historically, when I speak to Stelio, we communicate in English, and the official language, all the presentations, every material that is written in the company is written in English. So our board operates in English. We present to our investors in English. So we present to ourselves, even though we might be speaking in Spanish, the written material, everything is in English. Brazil is 60% of our revenues. But most of the people speak Spanish in the company, but it's kind of out of respect to the Brazilians, we use a neutral language, which is English, oftentimes when we are communicating with our Brazilian teams.
David?
We started with English first. We had a team where one of my co-founders is American, the other co-founder is Brazilian, I'm Colombian. So English ended up being the default. In our team of the first 10, 15 employees, there were already a number of people from the US that didn't speak any Spanish or Portuguese. So English became the kind of the lingua franca of the entire company. That has been an opportunity as well as a challenge. I think opportunity is that as we go now globally and expand where we're recruiting talent, we already have people from 45 different nationalities. We're very spread around. That becomes a match. It's already a culture that is, everything is in English. All the documentation is in English. People can get up to speed quickly on what's going on, and it's easier for people from around the world to get integrated with different teams. The challenge though is that, especially in the early stages in some of the countries, a lot of people don't speak English. And you might become a very exclusionary company if you require English as a requirement to enter. You might be leaving a lot of really important talent that just doesn't speak English, didn't have the opportunity. So the challenge is, how do you provide English lessons? How do you have inclusive your HR processes, recruiting processes to allow to recruit people, sometimes from lower income segments that don't speak English, train them in English and make them able to really fit within the company? That's one of the biggest challenges that we're working right now, because I don't think the answer also is we're an English company and all Latin Americans need to figure out how to speak English. At the end of the day, we are a Latin American company, right? So the challenge is finding that mix, and ultimately it's about the Spanish people have to learn Portuguese and English. The Portuguese people have to speak Spanish and English, and try to get everybody to speak all the languages, ultimately working some kind of mixture that so far is working.
Gabriel, in QuintoAndar?
Yeah, I think it's about the same thing. We're still not operating in other countries, but since the beginning, we also have internal documentation in English, and sometimes we have the opportunity to bring people from outside, even before the remote world phenomenon. And I think that's an opportunity. It's the challenge for everybody to adapt to that. But as David and others said here, I think it's also the opportunity to force us to do that. So if you have a chance of working in a company that will allow you and force you and require you to develop English, you just it's just better than, you know, going to school and not practicing it outside. So I think it's a forcing mechanism and is inevitable. So nothing very, very different to add there.
Well, it feels that we have the common learning here is English is an important language for presentations and for recruiting, challenging getting out more and more people as the companies grow to speak the language or to get the basics running. But it is something that I will tell you was not the case 15, 20 years ago. So it's changing in the region, and it's changing really, really fast. We're going to transition. There's one question that I'm going to answer, but as we transition to having the Stanford team give a little bit of some data on GSB. There's a question here that says, I feel Venezuela is a different case from most of the region, given its current economic condition. What would you recommend to an aspiring MBA student who would like to eventually come back to his country and make a difference? So I'm going to take a stab at answering that question. Guys, feel free to jump in if you want to. But to that question, this is part of the reason why I started Si Se Puede, which you're going to hear in a couple of minutes a little bit more about from the team at Stanford. We're basically creating this program that allows any Latin America to apply. Any Latin America that has certain financial conditions below a certain salary range to apply for free to Stanford's business school. And once you get admitted and you get accepted, there's a program where we will sponsor, have a fellowship, and have a few students per year that will get scholarships to attend and get most of his tuition paid for by Si Se Puede, which is with the purpose that if you go back to the region after studying and you end up having an impact and you're not going back to the country that you are from, we will waive any other debt you have remaining. So the idea is to get more people to attend school in the US, get prepared with the way Marcos, Lori, David, Gabe, Jeronimo had a chance to be exposed, go back to the region, have an impact, and do it in a way that is cost efficient for you. And that's part of what we want to do at Si Se Puede. And with Venezuela in particular, I hear you, I'm from Venezuela. It's hard to go back now, but you can definitely go back to the region, and we will cross our fingers that when it gets better and we can enter, this generation of people that went to these business schools that build these networks of relationships will have the impact to change an entire country. The same way all of you are changing your countries by bringing better financial services, better e-commerce, better ways to buy or finance a car, better ways to buy or finance your home or find a rent. So these are all things that impact society. And funny enough, we got an amazing group that went to this school and had a chance to do this. So with that, I want to transition quickly to the Stanford team to see if they have anything they want to add.
Thank you, Micky. Thank you so much to Micky and our panelists. This was just fantastic, and the time flew by. I feel like I could listen to your insights for a long time, so just much appreciated. And Micky, thank you so much for teeing up the information about Si Se Puede. As Micky mentioned, thanks to his generous support, we are so excited to offer this program at the GSB, specifically to those who are from Latin America who meet, as Micky mentioned, a certain financial condition that's making less than US $40,000 when you apply to the GSB. If you meet these conditions, your application fee will be waived. So this is not something you need to apply for. There's no additional paperwork needed. This will just happen in your application if you meet these conditions. We're so excited to be offering this. So for those of you who are on today, thank you for joining us so you can learn about this. For those who are just hearing about it, feel free to share this with your friends too. I did see a question in the chat, is this the same as Knight Hennessy? And that's a great question. As Micky mentioned, not only are we trying to make it possible for you to apply with this application fee waiver, but we want to enable you to be able to attend also, should you get in. So Micky mentioned the fellowship money that is available. Our financial aid is Once you are admitted, our financial aid is need-based. So should you have a high level of need, there are fellowships available to help you be able to attend. One of the questions that was out there is this the same as Knight Hennessy? I want to point out that there are fellowships specifically to support students from Latin America, but there are also many other fellowship programs such as Knight Hennessy. That's another way for you to apply to that program separately. You would have the potential to be a Knight Hennessy fellow as well as a Stanford GSB student. So Si Se Puede and Knight Hennessy are separate programs, but they are indicative of the level of support that's out there for you to be able to attend the GSB. There are millions of dollars of fellowships awarded. Our average fellowship each year per student is around 40,000. That's average, meaning many students get more than that. And so, whatever year you are thinking about applying, I encourage you to seek out what financial programs are available. But right now, Si Se Puede is available as an application fee waiver and fellowships should you be able to attend, in addition to many other programs we have. So I did see a few other questions in the chat that were around admissions focused. So I encourage you all to check our events page if you are interested in attending an information session that's more about the application process. We'd love to have you there and help you learn more about applying to the GSB. I know we're a few minutes over, so again, I just want to wrap up in thanking Micky so much for not only his support of this program, but for helping bring this dynamic panel together. It was such a great event. So great to hear all of your insights. I thank you all for your time. And again, thank you to everyone who attended today. It was great to have you with us, and I hope you found this as inspirational as I did.
One last question to finish to the panelists. Yeah. Who was the best student?
I was not in that top 10%, I can tell you that. It wasn't there.
Neither was I.
So I'll finish it up by saying to all of you, thank you. I know you're super busy. I appreciate you taking an hour of your day for this. Appreciate all of you. Thank you, Lisa from Stanford, for putting this together. And we look forward to seeing a lot of admissions, a lot of applications, and hopefully a lot of fellowships from Si Se Puede for more Latin Americans to come to Stanford and then go back and have an impact in South America.